My name is Eleanor Vance, I'm 65, and my daughter-in-law tried to poison my only son for his inheritance. Before I tell you how a simple mistake with a lunchbox uncovered her horrifying secret, let me know where you're watching from in the comments. It was a Tuesday just after noon. The kind of ordinary day in Dallas where you don't expect your world to shatter. I was in my office, the one I'd built from the ground up with my company Vance Aesthetics. The skyline stretched out before my window, but my mind was on lunch. I reached into my leather tote bag, expecting the small neat container my daughter-in-law, Sophia, packed for me every morning. But my fingers closed around something larger, heavier. I pulled it out. It was Michael's lunchbox. A chuckle escaped my lips. My son, my Michael, was a man with a man's appetite, and this container was easily twice the size of mine. That girl, I murmured to myself, shaking my head with a smile. Sophia is more scatterbrained than I am. It was a sweet, harmless mix-up, or so I thought. I placed the container on my mahogany desk, still smiling. It was a simple stainless steel box, but as I went to unclip the lid, I noticed something odd. Clinging to the rim, almost like a decorative flourish, were tiny white crystals. They sparkled under the office lights. It looked like someone had rimmed a margarita glass with salt. Well, that's a new recipe, I thought, amused. A savory dish with a sugar rim? Maybe she was trying a new fusion recipe. I decided to show Arthur. Dr. Arthur Jenkins, my head of product safety, had been my friend for 30 years. He was a retired forensic chemist, a brilliant man who had seen some of the darkest things imaginable in his career, but had the gentlest soul. I trusted his judgment more than anyone's. I picked up the lunchbox and walked over to his office, which was connected to mine. Arthur, you have to see this. I think Sophia is trying to fatten my boy up for the winter, I joked, placing the container on his desk. He looked up from his papers, his eyes twinkling over his reading glasses. What has she done now, Eleanor? She gave me Michael's lunch by mistake, and look at this. I pointed to the crystals. She's put sugar, or maybe some fancy salt, all over the rim. Is this the latest trend I'm too old to know about? Arthur didn't laugh. The smile vanished from his face as if it had been wiped clean. He leaned forward, his expression shifting from amusement to intense concentration. The air in the room suddenly felt heavy. He slowly reached into a drawer and pulled out a pair of latex gloves, snapping them on with a crisp sound that echoed in the sudden silence. What is it? I asked, my own smile faltering. He didn't answer. He picked up the container, tilting it carefully under the light. He gently scraped a few of the crystals onto a clean piece of paper with a letter opener. He squinted, his brow furrowed. I watched his face and I saw the color drain from it. He went pale, a sickly ashen color that I had never seen on him before. A knot of ice began to form in the pit of my stomach. He looked up at me, and the kindness in his eyes was gone, replaced by a raw, urgent fear. His voice, when he finally spoke, was a low, strained whisper. Eleanor, who packed this lunch? Sophia did, I said, my voice barely audible. She always does. Arthur, you're scaring me. What's wrong? He ignored my question, his eyes boring into mine. Call Michael. Call your son right now. Why? He's in a big meeting, a quarterly review. I don't care what he's in. Arthur cut me off, his voice rising sharp and commanding. Call him. Tell him to get to the nearest hospital. Tell him not to ask questions, not to eat or drink anything, just to go. Now. My heart started hammering against my ribs. Arthur, for God's sake, tell me what you're seeing. He finally looked down at the crystals on the paper, then back at me. His expression was grim, his voice trembling slightly as he delivered the words that would change my life forever. I can't be 100% certain without a lab, Eleanor. But this looks exactly like a refined arsenic compound. Arsenic. The word hung in the air between us, venomous and unreal. My breath hitched in my throat. I stared at him, unable to process it. It felt like a punch to the gut, knocking all the air from my lungs. This had to be a joke. A sick, terrible joke. But the look on Arthur's face was no joke. It was pure, unadulterated horror. Do as I say, Eleanor, he pleaded, his voice cracking. Please, don't waste a single second. Michael's life could depend on it. The world tilted on its axis. The solid floor beneath my feet suddenly felt like quicksand. The lunchbox, once a symbol of a daughter-in-law's care, now looked like a coffin on my friend's desk. My mind reeled trying to connect the dots. Sophia, sweet, smiling Sophia, and arsenic. It didn't make sense. It couldn't be real. But I saw the truth in Arthur's terrified eyes. I grabbed my phone, my fingers fumbling, clumsy and numb. I saw Michael's name on the screen. My son. My only child. I pressed the call button, my hand shaking so violently I could barely hold the phone to my ear as I pressed the call button, my hand shaking so violently I could barely hold the phone to my ear as my mind reeled back. Just a few hours earlier, to that very morning. The sun was streaming into the kitchen of our home in Highland Park, that big beautiful house my late husband and I had built, the one I thought would be filled with generations of love. The air smelled of freshly brewed coffee and the faint, sweet scent of the roses Maria, my housekeeper, had just cut from the garden. It was a perfect morning. Deceptively perfect. Michael was standing by the island, already in his sharp suit, knotting his tie. At 35, he was the spitting image of his father, tall, confident, with that same determined set to his jaw. He was a finance director at a major investment firm downtown, a promotion he'd earned through sheer grit and intelligence. Watching him, my heart swelled with a pride so fierce it almost hurt. He was my boy, my only child. My entire world. Sophia glided into the kitchen, a vision in a simple sundress, her dark hair pulled back in a sleek ponytail. She was always so effortlessly put together. She smiled, a bright, dazzling thing that could light up a room. She kissed Michael on the cheek, then turned to me. "Good morning, Eleanor," she said, her voice like honey. "I made your favorite, the Cobb salad with light vinaigrette." She gestured to the two lunchboxes on the counter. The large one for Michael, the smaller one for me. It was her daily ritual, this act of care. She insisted on it, saying restaurant food was unhealthy, and that she loved taking care of her family. How I had admired her for that. How I had praised her devotion. "You spoil us, dear," I'd said, just as I always did. I truly believed it. I saw her not as a daughter-in-law, but as the daughter I never had. When Michael first brought her home 5 years ago, I was overjoyed. She was charming, attentive, and seemed to adore my son. She'd looked me right in the eye and said, "I promise I'll always take care of him, Mrs. Vance." I believed her. I welcomed her into my home, into my heart, into our family's future and its inheritance. I remember watching her hands as she packed the bags. They were graceful, her nails perfectly manicured. She chatted away about a charity luncheon she was planning, her laughter echoing lightly in the kitchen. She placed the large container in Michael's briefcase and handed me the smaller one with that radiant smile. "Have a wonderful day, Mom," she'd said, calling me Mom just like I'd always wanted. Now, standing in Arthur's office with the world spinning, that memory curdled in my stomach. Her smile, once so genuine in my mind, now seemed like a mask. Her words of affection felt like carefully rehearsed lines from a twisted play. Every thoughtful gesture, every prepared meal, was cast in a sinister new light. This hadn't been a simple mix-up. This felt like a message, a miscalculation in a game I never even knew I was playing. I want to take a moment here because if you've ever been betrayed by family, you'll know this feeling. It's that sickening lurch in your gut when you look back and see all the red flags you missed. All the little lies you accepted, the odd comments you dismissed, the gut feelings you ignored because you wanted so desperately to believe in the goodness of someone you loved. They were all there, hiding in plain sight, and my love for my son and the woman he married had blinded me completely. That morning had been a lie. Our whole life, for who knows how long, had been a lie. The phone was still ringing in my ear, the sound shrill and piercing. Michael wasn't picking up. My perfect morning was a fantasy, and as I stood frozen in Arthur's office, I had a terrifying premonition that I was already too late. I didn't know it then, but this was only the beginning. The perfect daughter-in-law I thought I knew was a monster, and I had welcomed her right into the heart of my home. The drive to UT Southwestern Medical Center was a blur. I don't remember the traffic or the streets I took. My mind was a chaotic storm of denial and terror. Arthur's words echoed in my head. A nightmarish loop. Arsenic. Michael's life could depend on it. I clutched the steering wheel, my knuckles white, praying it was all a mistake. A terrible, catastrophic mistake. Arthur had called ahead. pulling strings with a former colleague in the toxicology department. When I burst through the emergency room doors, a nurse was already waiting for me. I thrust the plastic bag containing the lunchbox at her. "My colleague, Dr. Jenkins, he sent me here. You need to test this immediately." My voice was a ragged whisper. She took it without a word, her expression calm but serious, and disappeared through a set of double doors. I was led to a sterile, empty waiting room. The silence was deafening, broken only by the tick-tock of a clock on the wall and the frantic pounding of my own heart. Tick-tock. Every second felt like an hour. Tick-tock. Every tick was a hammer blow against my sanity. I pulled out my phone again and dialed Michael's number. Straight to voicemail. His meeting. Of course. My fingers, trembling and clumsy, typed out a text. The words looked alien on the screen. "Michael, this is an emergency. Go to UT Southwestern R now. Do not tell anyone, not even Sophia. I'll explain everything. Please just go." I hit send and stared at the screen, praying for the 3 little dots that would mean he was typing back. Nothing. The message sat there, delivered but unread. I felt a wave of helplessness wash over me. What if he didn't see it in time? What if he was already feeling sick? What if he'd already eaten something else she'd given him? My mind flashed with images of my son. Michael as a little boy, his face smeared with chocolate, laughing in the backyard. Michael on his graduation day, so proud in his cap and gown. Michael just last week, sitting on the sofa after a long day, rubbing his stomach. "Just stress, Mom," he'd said, his face looking unusually pale under the lamplight. "This new promotion is a killer." Stress. We had all blamed it on stress. The fatigue that had been clinging to him for months. The nausea he'd occasionally complain about. The way he seemed to have lost his vibrant energy. I'd even made an appointment with our family doctor, who ran some basic blood tests and found nothing, simply prescribing vitamins and rest. How could we have known? How could I have been so blind? The clock on the wall kept ticking, mocking me. An eternity passed. It might have been an hour, it might have been more. Finally, a doctor in a white coat walked in. He had a kind face, but his eyes were grave. He held a clipboard. "Mrs. Vance." I shot to my feet. "Yes?" "My son, the food sample." He sat down in the chair opposite me, his gaze steady. "We ran a preliminary analysis. Mrs. Vance, your friend was right to be concerned. The sample contains a significant concentration of arsenic trioxide." The clinical words hit me with the force of a physical blow. I sank back into my chair, the strength leaving my legs. It was real. This nightmare was real. "It's a highly toxic substance," he continued, his voice gentle but firm. "Administered in small, repeated doses over a long period, it mimics the symptoms of a chronic illness. Fatigue, nausea, stomach pain, gradual organ damage. It's designed to be slow. It's designed to be hard to detect." He didn't have to say it. My mind screamed it. Designed. This wasn't an accident. This was a plan. This was deliberate. "If your son has been consuming this regularly," the doctor said, "he is in serious danger. He needs a full toxicology screening immediately. We need to know how much is in his system." I just stared at him, my throat too tight to speak. The pieces clicked into place with horrifying clarity. The constant tiredness. The stomach complaints. The pale skin. It wasn't stress. It was poison. A slow, methodical poisoning, delivered with a smile every single morning in a lovingly packed lunch. And there was only one person who packed that lunch. The doctor's pager beeped. He stood up. "I have to go, but a nurse will be out to get more information. We need to contact your son." "I've tried," I croaked. "He's not answering." He gave me a look of profound sympathy and left. I sat alone in that cold, white room, the doctor's words echoing around me. The last shred of denial I had been clinging to was gone, ripped away. There was no mistake. There was no misunderstanding. Sophia, my daughter-in-law, the woman I had loved like my own, was trying to murder my son. And at that moment I didn't feel grief. I didn't feel sadness. All I felt was a cold, hard rage beginning to solidify in my heart. I didn't go home. I couldn't. The thought of facing Sophia, of looking into her eyes and pretending that I didn't know her monstrous secret, was unbearable. My mind, now sharp with adrenaline and rage, had moved past the shock and onto a single burning question. Why? The answer, I suspected, was not in my heart, but in a filing cabinet downtown. I drove with a grim determination to the offices of Davison and Lowe, my family's law firm for over 40 years. Mr. Davison, a man with silver hair and an impeccably calm demeanor, had handled my late husband's estate and my own will. If anyone knew the financial implications of my son's death, it was him. His receptionist looked surprised to see me without an appointment, but I must have had a look on my face that brooked no argument. I was ushered into his office almost immediately. "Eleanor," he said, rising from behind his large oak desk. "What a surprise. Is everything all right?" "No, David, it is not," I said, my voice flat and cold. I sank into the leather chair opposite him. "I need to see my will. The most current version. Right now." He raised an eyebrow, but he didn't question me. He understood urgency. He retrieved a thick folder from a locked cabinet and slid it across the desk toward me. "This is the version you signed last year, after Michael's promotion." My hands were surprisingly steady as I opened the folder. I didn't care about the properties or the stock portfolios. I flipped through the pages, my eyes scanning for one section: beneficiaries. And there it was in crisp black and white legalese, a clause that made my blood run cold. It stated that my entire estate, including my controlling shares in Vance Aesthetics, my life's work, would pass to my son Michael Vance. But then came the devastating rider. In the event of Michael's passing before my own, his share of the inheritance, which was everything, would legally transfer to his surviving spouse, to Sophia. "David," I said, looking up at him, my voice tight. "If Michael were to die, she would get everything?" "Yes, Eleanor," he confirmed, his expression somber. "That is the standard structure. She would become the sole heir to your entire fortune. It's an immense amount of money." The room felt like it was closing in on me. It was all there. The motive. An inheritance worth hundreds of millions of dollars. Suddenly, a flood of memories rushed back. Little moments I had dismissed as innocent curiosity. Sophia, over dinner, casually asking about the valuation of the company. Sophia, while we were on vacation, inquiring about our offshore investments. "Just making conversation," she'd say with a light laugh. And then a more chilling memory surfaced. A month ago, we were looking through old photo albums. I was showing her a picture of me and my late husband Richard on our wedding day. It was my favorite photo. As I was talking, Sophia, who was holding a glass of red wine, stumbled. The wine sloshed over the page, completely ruining the photograph. She was beside herself with apologies, tears in her eyes. "Oh, Eleanor, I'm so clumsy. I'm terribly sorry." I had comforted her, telling her it was just an accident. But later that evening, Maria, my housekeeper of over 20 years, came to me. Maria was quiet, observant, and fiercely loyal. She told me, her voice low, that she had been in the hallway and had seen the whole thing. She said Sophia hadn't stumbled at all. And worse, after I had left the room, Maria saw Sophia in the kitchen, wiping a tiny triumphant smile off her face. At the time, I told Maria she must have been mistaken. I couldn't imagine it. I wouldn't allow myself to. Why would Sophia do something so pointlessly cruel? Now I knew. It wasn't pointless at all. It was symbolic. She wasn't just after the money. She wanted to erase my past, to erase my husband's memory, to erase me. She saw me and my legacy not as family, but as an obstacle. My son wasn't the love of her life. He was a stepping stone, a pawn in her twisted game for our fortune. And when he was gone, I would be next. I stood up, the leather of the chair groaning in protest. "Thank you, David. I have what I need." He looked at me, his eyes full of concern. "Eleanor, what is this about? If you're in some kind of trouble." "I'm not in trouble," I said, my voice now hard as steel. "But someone else is about to be." As I walked out of that office and into the harsh Texas sun, the grief and fear inside me had been burned away, replaced by something else. A cold, calculating fury. She had started a war when she put that poison in my son's food. She had tried to take the one thing in the world that mattered to me. She wanted to destroy my family. Well, two could play at that game. She had underestimated the wrath of a mother. And she was about to find out just how terrible a mistake that was. The first person I needed on my side was Michael. He had to know. He had to believe me. I drove to his office building downtown, my mind racing, formulating a plan. I couldn't just burst in and accuse his wife of attempted murder. He would think I'd lost my mind. I needed proof. I needed to present it calmly, logically, like a business proposal. I called his assistant from the lobby. "It's Eleanor Vance. I have an urgent family matter to discuss with Michael. It cannot wait." Minutes later, I was in his corner office, the Dallas skyline a glittering backdrop to the ugliest conversation of my life. He stood up to greet me, a warm smile on his face, though he looked tired, the shadows under his eyes more pronounced than ever. "Mom, what's up? Everything okay with the company?" he asked, his voice full of a cheerful innocence that broke my heart. "Michael, sit down," I said, my tone leaving no room for argument. The smile faded from his face, replaced by a look of concern. I didn't waste time with pleasantries. I opened my purse and laid out the evidence on his polished desk. First, the preliminary lab report from the hospital. I placed it directly in front of him. "Read this," I commanded. He picked it up, his brow furrowed in confusion. I watched his eyes scan the page. I saw the moment he read the word arsenic. His face went slack with disbelief, then his skin turned a deathly pale. He looked up at me, his eyes wide and uncomprehending. "What is this? A joke?" he stammered, his hand trembling. "Do I look like I'm joking?" I said, my voice steady. I told him everything. The lunchbox mix-up, the crystals on the rim, Arthur's immediate recognition of danger, the rush to the hospital. I told him fact by brutal fact, leaving no room for doubt. He shook his head again and again. No, Mom. There's been a mistake. A lab error. Sophia, she loves me. She couldn't. The denial was thick in his voice, his mind refusing to accept the unthinkable. That's when I laid the second document on his desk, the copy of my will. I tapped my finger on the clause about the surviving spouse. "She gets everything, Michael. The entire inheritance. Hundreds of millions of dollars. All she has to do is wait for you to die." He stared at the page, then back at the lab report. I could see the gears turning in his head, the terrible logic connecting the dots. I saw the memories of his own unexplained illness, the fatigue, the stomach pains flashing in his eyes. The love and trust he had for his wife were at war with the cold, hard evidence in front of him. She's been so worried about me," he whispered, more to himself than to me. "She makes me special teas, brings me vitamins." The blood drained from my face. "Michael, have you eaten or drunk anything she's given you today?" He shook his head. "No, I've been in meetings all morning." A wave of relief so powerful it almost made me buckle washed over me. "Good," I breathed. "From this moment on, you do not eat or drink a single thing she prepares. Not a crumb, not a drop. Do you understand me?" He looked at me, his eyes filled with a shattered, heartbreaking pain. The denial was crumbling, replaced by a dawning horror. I saw the love for his wife die in his eyes, and it was one of the most painful things I have ever witnessed. Then that pain hardened into something else. A cold, quiet anger. "That woman," he said, his voice barely a whisper, "has been poisoning me in my own home." He stood up and slammed his fist on his desk, the sound echoing in the quiet office. "She wants to steal your legacy. Our family's legacy." "Yes," I said softly. "And we are not going to let her." That afternoon, we walked into the Dallas Police headquarters together. We were directed to Detective Miller, a veteran homicide detective with tired eyes that had seen it all. He listened to our story in a small, sterile interrogation room, his expression unreadable. He looked at the lab report, at the copy of the will. He didn't seem surprised, just weary. "Domestic poisonings, it's always about the money," he said, his voice a gravelly monotone. "The problem is proving it. Right now, her lawyer would argue contamination. An accident." "It was no accident," I said fiercely. "I believe you," he said. "But we need to make her show her hand. We need to catch her in the act. And for that," he leaned forward, his eyes locking onto mine, "we need to attack her motive. We need to make her think her payday is about to disappear." We need to make her panic. Panic people make mistakes. A plan began to form in my mind, cold and clear. I knew exactly how to make her panic. I knew her weakness, her obsession. I knew just what I had to do. As we left the station, Michael put his arm around me. He looked 10 years older than he had that morning. "Mom," he said, his voice firm with a newfound resolve. "Whatever it takes. We do it." Sophia had started a war. Now she was about to find out what it was like to fight against a Vance. She had picked a fight with the wrong mother. The next day the trap was set. The first move was mine. I waited until Sophia was in the living room, arranging flowers, humming a cheerful tune. The very picture of domestic bliss. It made my stomach turn. I picked up the phone in the study, leaving the door ajar, and dialed my lawyer's number. "David, it's Eleanor," I said, my voice intentionally loud, projecting an air of firm decision. "I need you to come to the house this afternoon. I've made a decision. I want to make significant changes to my will." Out of the corner of my eye, I saw her hands freeze over a vase of lilies. Just for a second, her humming stopped. Then, just as quickly, she resumed her task as if she hadn't heard a thing. But I knew she had. The bait had been laid. That afternoon, Mr. Davison arrived. I had briefed him on the entire situation, and he agreed to play his part. I had him park his recognizable Lincoln Town car right in the driveway, in full view of the front windows where Sophia was pretending to read a magazine on the porch. We sat in the formal living room, the room we rarely used, and I made sure the windows were open just enough for our voices to carry. "David, I've been doing a lot of thinking." I began, my voice filled with a faux philanthropic passion. "This company, my fortune. It's more than one family needs. I've decided to rewrite my will. I'm going to establish a charitable foundation." "A foundation, Eleanor?" Davison asked, playing his part perfectly. "That's a very generous thought." "More than a thought," I declared, raising my voice slightly. "It's my new legacy. I want to donate the majority of my estate. I'm thinking 90%, to a foundation for women entrepreneurs. Women who are trying to build something for themselves just like I did. They need it more than my own family does." I heard a sharp intake of breath from the hallway. Sophia was walking by with a tray of iced tea, and she stopped dead in her tracks. I saw her reflection in the gilded mirror over the fireplace. Her face was a mask of shock, her knuckles white as she gripped the tray. She quickly composed herself and continued into the kitchen, but the damage was done. The idea of her 9-figure inheritance vanishing into thin air had just become a terrifying reality for her. The pressure cooker had been turned on. Now I just needed to turn up the heat. That evening, I stumbled upon the second piece of the puzzle. I was walking past the guest room when I heard Sophia's voice, low and angry, coming from inside. She was on the phone with a friend. My hand hovered over the doorknob. I knew I shouldn't, but I had to. I pressed my ear gently against the wood. "Can you believe the nerve of that old woman?" Sophia was saying, her voice dripping with a venom I had never heard before. "She's controlled Michael his whole life. She's never thought I was good enough for him, always looking down on me. And now this. After all the years I've wasted smiling and pretending to be the perfect little wife, she's going to give it all away to charity? I have sacrificed too much for this family to walk away with nothing." Sacrificed? The word was like a slap in the face. What had she sacrificed? I had given her a life of luxury, a home, a family. And this was how she saw it. As a waste? As a performance she was owed a paycheck for? The rage inside me burned hotter. Later, after dinner, she announced she had a late spa appointment. It was her usual excuse for getting out of the house. But this time I was suspicious. After she left, I went out onto the back patio. And I heard her. She was huddled in a dark corner of the garden, her voice a tense, urgent whisper on her phone. "The plan has to change," she hissed. "We can't wait anymore. That old witch is going to sign the new papers. We have to act. Now." My heart stopped. Who was she talking to? She wasn't just greedy. She had an accomplice. This was more organized, more dangerous than I had imagined. I coughed loudly, stepping out from the shadows and pretending I was just getting some fresh air. Sophia jumped, whirling around with a guilty gasp. She shoved her phone into her purse. "Oh, Mom, you startled me," she said, forcing a shaky laugh. just canceling my appointment. I'm suddenly feeling exhausted. You should get some rest, dear, I said, my voice dangerously calm. You wouldn't want to overexert yourself. I walked back inside, my mind racing. She was panicking. The trap was working perfectly. She was getting desperate, and desperate people get sloppy. I knew with a chilling certainty that she was going to make her move very, very soon. I just had to be ready to catch her when she did. The next 2 days were the most tense of my life. I was living with a woman who was actively plotting to kill my son, and I had to pretend everything was normal. Michael played his part, complaining of fatigue and stomach pains, while I secretly cooked all his meals in my private kitchenette upstairs, swapping them out with Sophia's poisoned offerings when she wasn't looking. We were walking on a tightrope over a pit of vipers. Detective Miller had been true to his word. While Sophia was out on one of her spa appointments, a plainclothes officer, posing as an electrician fixing a faulty outlet, had installed a tiny high-definition camera in the corner of our kitchen. It was hidden in the smoke detector, offering a perfect bird's-eye view of the food preparation area. On the third day, Miller called me. We're ready. Come down to the temporary command post. It's time to watch the show. The command post was an unmarked van parked a block away from my house, filled with monitors and surveillance equipment. I sat next to Miller, my heart pounding a nervous rhythm against my ribs. We watched the screen, which showed a live feed of my beautiful sunlit kitchen. It looked so peaceful, so normal. Then Sophia walked in. She was wearing a cheerful yellow apron, her hair tied back. She looked like she was about to bake a batch of cookies. But she wasn't baking. She began preparing Michael's lunch, a hearty beef stew. She chopped vegetables, seared the meat, her movements efficient and practiced. Then came the moment. She glanced over her shoulder, a quick, furtive look towards the kitchen door. The coast was clear. She reached into the pocket of her apron and pulled out a small, unlabeled glass vial. My breath caught in my throat. It was the same vial the police had described, the one she must have used all along. With a chilling lack of emotion, she unscrewed the cap and carefully, methodically, tapped a small amount of white powder into the simmering pot of stew. Her face was a blank mask of concentration. There was no hesitation, no remorse, just cold, calculated action. She stirred the stew, her movements smooth and casual, as if she were just adding a pinch of salt. Then she screwed the cap back on the vial and slipped it back into her pocket. I gripped the edge of the console, my nails digging into the plastic. A wave of nausea washed over me. It was one thing to know it in your head, to see the lab reports and connect the dots. It was another thing entirely to watch it, to see the casual, everyday evil of it. This woman, who laughed at my dinner table, who hugged my son, was methodically poisoning him with the same detached air someone might use to water their plants. If you're listening to this and you've ever had your trust so completely shattered, I want you to know I see you. That moment in the van watching that screen was the most profoundly painful moment of my life. It was the final brutal confirmation that the woman I had welcomed into my family was a stranger, a predator wearing the face of someone I loved. We got her, Miller said, his voice a low growl. We got her cold. He pointed to the monitor. High-definition video. Clear as day. That's the ball game, Mrs. Vance. I nodded, unable to speak. A single tear escaped and traced a hot path down my cheek. I felt a fire ignite inside me, a righteous fury that burned away the pain. Seeing her do it, seeing her coldness, erased any lingering doubt, any shred of pity I might have had. Now what? I finally asked, my voice hoarse. Miller turned to me, his expression grim. Now we have the evidence to put her away for a very long time. But her lawyer will still fight. They'll claim she didn't know what it was, that someone else put her up to it. To make sure this is an open and shut case, to make sure she can't wriggle out of it, we need one more thing. He paused, letting the weight of his words sink in. We need a confession. And to get that, we need to spring the final trap. I knew what he was going to say before he said it. The plan we had discussed, the one that terrified me but was our only sure path to justice. It's time, he said. It's time for your son to die. That evening the house felt like a stage set for a tragedy. The air was thick with unspoken tension. Every creak of the floorboards, every tick of the grandfather clock in the hall seemed unnaturally loud. My nerves were stretched to the breaking point. Sophia served the stew for dinner. She placed a large bowl in front of Michael, a smaller one in front of me. Of course, Maria had already helped me swap Michael's bowl with an identical, untainted one I had prepared upstairs. The poison stew sat in front of my son, a steaming bowl of death. "I tried a new seasoning today, honey," Sophia said, her voice sweet as syrup. "Let me know what you think." "Smells delicious," Michael said, his acting skills far better than I could have hoped for. He managed a weak smile. He looked pale and drawn, a look that required very little acting after the weeks of stress and the slow poisoning he'd already endured. I watched him lift the spoon to his lips. Even knowing it was safe, my heart leaped into my throat. He took a single small taste. It's really good, Sophia," he said, his voice a little strained. He ate a few more spoonfuls, then put his spoon down, pressing a hand to his stomach. "Wow. I don't know what's wrong with me. I'm suddenly not feeling so great." Sophia's eyes lit up with a flicker of concern that didn't quite reach them. "Oh no, honey. Is it your stomach again? You've been working too hard." That was the cue. Michael's face went slack. His eyes rolled back slightly. He made a choking sound, and then with a dramatic lurch that knocked over his water glass, he collapsed forward, his head hitting the dining table with a sickening thud. For a split second, my mother's instinct screamed, forgetting it was an act. I jumped to my feet. "Michael!" My voice was a genuine shriek of terror. Sophia also leaped up, rushing to his side. "Michael! Oh my God, Michael, wake up!" She shook his shoulder, her voice rising in a theatrical panic. She was a phenomenal actress. But as she leaned over him trying to check his pulse, I saw it. A quick, almost imperceptible glance towards me. And in that glance, I saw a flash of pure, unadulterated triumph. She thought her plan had finally worked. That look fueled me. I grabbed my phone, my hands trembling, and dialed 911. The call was, of course, being routed directly to a police dispatcher who was in on the plan. "My son. He's collapsed." I cried into the phone, my voice cracking with feigned hysteria. "He's not breathing. Please send an ambulance." Sophia was sobbing now, great heaving crocodile tears. No, this can't be happening," she wailed, burying her face in her hands. Within minutes, the wail of a siren grew louder, filling our quiet, wealthy street with its urgent cry. 2 paramedics, both strapping young police officers in convincing uniforms, burst through the door with a stretcher. They worked with practiced efficiency, checking Michael's vitals, declaring he was in cardiac arrest, and loading him onto the stretcher. Sophia lunged forward. "I'm going with him. I'm his wife." One of the officers held up a firm hand, stopping her. "I'm sorry, ma'am. We need room to work. Only one family member can ride with us." That was my cue. I stepped forward, putting a comforting hand on Sophia's arm. Her skin was cold and clammy. "You stay here, dear," I said, my voice thick with fake tears. "I'll go with him. You call his father's family. I'll call you from the hospital the second I know anything." She looked at me, her face a mask of grief, and nodded numbly. But I could feel the lie vibrating through her. She didn't want to go to the hospital. She wanted to stay here, in this house in her new kingdom. I climbed into the back of the ambulance. The doors slammed shut, sealing us in. The siren wailed, and we sped off into the night. As soon as we were out of sight of the house, Michael sat up on the stretcher, his face grim. He took my hand. "You were incredible, Mom," he whispered. "So were you," I whispered back, squeezing his hand tightly. Now for the hard part. The ambulance wasn't heading to the real emergency room. It was heading to a separate wing of the hospital that the police had secured for our final act. The stage was set. The lead actress was about to make her entrance. And I was ready for her. I was ready to bring the curtain down on her wicked performance once and for all. The hospital wing was eerily quiet. Detective Miller had arranged for a private room, one usually reserved for VIPs, and it had been transformed into our stage. It was rigged with hidden cameras and microphones. Michael lay on the hospital bed, perfectly still, hooked up to monitors that were programmed to display a flat line. A talented makeup artist from the police department had given his skin a pale, deathly pallor. He looked terrifyingly convincing. Dr. Wilson, a trusted colleague of Miller's, was playing the part of the attending physician. She gave me a reassuring nod as I took my place in a chair by the bedside, arranging my face into a mask of maternal grief. My heart was pounding a wild drum against my ribs. This was it, the culmination of everything. I took out my phone. My fingers hovered over Sophia's name. I took a deep, steadying breath and typed the message that would seal her fate. Come to the hospital. It's Michael. He's gone. He didn't make it. I pressed send. The message delivered instantly. Now we waited. Every footstep in the hallway outside sent a jolt of adrenaline through me. Detective Miller and 2 other officers were in an adjacent observation room, watching everything on a bank of monitors. I was alone on the stage, waiting for my co-star. 43 minutes. That's how long it took. I will never forget it. 43 minutes before I heard the frantic clicking of heels on the linoleum floor. The door to the room burst open. Sophia stood there, a perfect picture of a distraught widow. Her hair was a mess, her mascara was smeared down her cheeks, and she was breathing in ragged gasps. She had clearly spent the car ride making sure she looked the part. She rushed towards me, throwing her arms around me in a dramatic embrace. No, Eleanor, no. Tell me it's not true. She sobbed against my shoulder. Her body was trembling, but it felt like the manufactured trembling of a bad actress. I stood there stiffly, patting her back. I'm so sorry, my dear. I whispered, my voice choked with a rage so profound it almost suffocated me. The hypocrisy was breathtaking. The woman who had murdered my son was now crying in my arms, seeking comfort from me. I gently pushed her away. You should say goodbye. I gestured towards the bed. She approached the bed, her sobs subsiding into quiet, pitiful whimpers. She looked down at Michael's still, pale face. She reached out a trembling hand and touched his cheek. Tears streamed down her face. She was putting on an Oscar-worthy performance. She leaned in close to his ear, as if to whisper one last, loving farewell. Her body shielded her mouth from my view, but the hidden microphones were sensitive. They picked up everything. And in the observation room, Detective Miller leaned closer to his speaker. Sophia thought no one could hear her. She thought it was just her and the body of her husband, the man who stood between her and a life of unimaginable wealth. And she whispered 6 little words. 6 words that were her undoing. Finally, all of this is mine. It was so quiet, I almost didn't hear it from across the room. But I saw the look on her face as she straightened up. The grief was gone. In its place was a look of pure, triumphant relief. The slightest smirk touched the corners of her lips before she quickly replaced it with her mask of sorrow. But it was too late. We had heard it. And that's when my son opened his eyes. He sat up in the bed, the sheet falling away from his chest. He turned his head and looked directly at his wife. Sophia didn't scream. It was a sound beyond a scream, a strangled, guttural gasp of pure, primal terror. She stumbled backward, her hands flying to her mouth, her eyes wide with the horror of someone seeing a ghost. No, she whispered, her voice a reedy thread. It can't be. You're dead. Michael's voice, when he spoke, was as cold and dead as the grave she had planned for him. Dead, he repeated, his eyes burning with a cold fire I had never seen in him before. Is that what you wanted, Sophia? Was all of this, he gestured around the room, part of the plan? She just stared at him, her face a canvas of dawning comprehension and absolute panic. The trap had snapped shut. The performance was over. And the curtain was about to rise on her final act. What is this? Sophia stammered, her eyes darting from Michael's face to mine, the color draining from her own. This is some kind of sick joke. The only joke here, Sophia, is that you thought you could get away with it, I said, my voice low and shaking with controlled fury. I stood up from my chair. Just then the door opened. Detective Miller walked in, flanked by 2 uniformed officers. His face was grim, his eyes hard as stone. He held a small digital audio recorder in his hand. Sophia Vance, he said, his voice booming in the small room. You're under arrest for the attempted murder of your husband, Michael Vance. Her head whipped around to face him. Arrest? You're crazy. I haven't done anything. My husband just had a medical emergency. Miller didn't flinch. He pressed a button on the recorder. Sophia's own voice filled the room, a clear, cold whisper. Finally, all of this is mine. The color, what little was left of it, vanished completely from Sophia's face. She looked like she had been turned to stone. She stared at the recorder as if it were a venomous snake. That's not what I said," she stuttered, her bravado crumbling. "You twisted my words." "Did we twist this too?" Miller asked calmly. He nodded to one of the officers, who was holding a tablet. The officer turned the screen towards Sophia. On it was crystal clear video from our kitchen. Video of her in her yellow apron, calmly sprinkling white powder into the stew pot. She stared at the screen, her mouth opening and closing like a fish out of water. There was no sound. All the lies, all the deception, all the carefully constructed facades were being stripped away, layer by layer, right before her eyes. That's just a special spice," she finally choked out, the lie so pathetic it was almost laughable. "A family recipe." "Arsenic is not a family recipe, Sophia," Michael said, swinging his legs off the bed to stand. He was still in his hospital gown, but he stood tall, an avenging angel confronting his own murderer. "How long, Sophia? How long have you been feeding me poison?" She recoiled from him, stumbling backward until she hit the wall. She looked trapped, a cornered animal. Her eyes darted around the room, searching for an escape that wasn't there. She looked at me, her expression shifting to one of pure, unadulterated hatred. And then the dam broke. "It's her fault," she shrieked, pointing a trembling finger at me. The mask of the grieving widow was gone, replaced by the twisted, ugly face of her true self. "All of it. It's her fault." The officers moved towards her, but Miller held up a hand, letting her talk. He knew a confession when he heard one. "I gave this family everything," she screamed, her voice hysterical. "I played the part. I was the perfect wife, the perfect daughter-in-law. And what was my reward? To be treated like the hired help while she controlled everything, every cent. The inheritance was supposed to be Michael's and mine. So you decided to speed things up?" I asked, my voice dangerously quiet. "I had to," she spat back. "He was weak. He would have let you control him forever. And then she was going to give it all away. My money. My future. She was going to donate it all to charity. After everything I did, everything I put up with. She left me no choice." The confession hung in the air, raw and ugly. It wasn't a confession of remorse. It was a confession of entitlement. Of a greed so profound that it saw murder as a justifiable business expense. She didn't feel guilty. She felt cheated. I looked at this screaming, hate-filled woman, and I felt nothing but a profound, empty pity. She had destroyed her own life and my son's for a fantasy. "You had a choice, Sophia," I said softly. "You always have a choice. And you chose this." One of the officers stepped forward and snapped handcuffs on her wrists. The click of the metal was the final, definitive sound of her world ending. She didn't fight. She just slumped against the wall, all the rage and energy draining out of her, leaving behind a hollow, defeated shell. As they let her out of the room, she didn't look at Michael. She looked at me, her eyes filled with a look of pure loathing. It didn't matter. She had no more power over us. She was nothing. The days that followed were a whirlwind of police statements, lawyer meetings, and blinding media attention. The story was a sensation in Dallas high society. Socialite heiress arrested in husband's poisoning plot. The headlines were lurid, the details scandalous. Our family name, a name my husband and I had built with integrity and hard work, was being dragged through the mud. Sophia, faced with the overwhelming evidence, the video, the audio recording, her own confession in that hospital room, crumbled completely. In her official statement, she laid out the entire sickening plan. She admitted to researching slow-acting poisons on hidden corners of the internet. She confessed to buying the arsenic from an illicit chemical supplier she found online, a transaction paid for in cryptocurrency. Her meticulous planning was as chilling as the act itself. Her accomplice, the we she had spoken to in the garden, turned out to be a disgraced financial advisor she had been seeing on the side. He had helped her understand the intricacies of my will and had encouraged her, believing he would share in the massive payday. He was arrested within days, his own greed leading to his downfall. The legal proceedings were swift. With her full confession, there was no trial. Sophia pled guilty to attempted murder and conspiracy. the judge, calling her actions a chilling display of calculated, cold-blooded greed, sentenced her to the maximum penalty, life in prison with no possibility of parole for 25 years. Her accomplice received a similar sentence. The gavel fell, and a chapter of our lives was slammed shut. While the legal storm raged, a personal one was just beginning to calm. Michael underwent extensive medical treatment. The doctors were optimistic, but the road to recovery was long. The arsenic had taken a toll on his system, but they had caught it in time. Slowly, with chelation therapy and a strict health regimen, the poison was flushed from his body. The physical recovery was arduous, but the emotional recovery was a far greater challenge. The man he had been trusting, open-hearted, was gone, replaced by someone more cautious, more somber. The betrayal had left a scar on his soul that no medicine could heal. As for Vance aesthetics, the scandal could have destroyed it. Instead, I decided to take control of the narrative. I called a press conference. I stood before a sea of cameras and microphones, not as a victim but as a survivor. I announced that the charitable foundation I had used as bait for Sophia would now become a reality. I officially launched the Vance Foundation, endowing it with a significant portion of my personal fortune. Its mission: to provide grants and mentorship to women who have survived domestic abuse and financial exploitation, helping them rebuild their lives and start their own businesses. I would turn the pain Sophia had inflicted upon us into a force for good. I would take her selfish motive, money, and use it to empower the very kind of women she sought to become by deceit and violence. The public response was overwhelmingly positive. Our company's reputation was not only saved, it was enhanced. Slowly, life began to find a new normal. The media circus moved on. Michael's health improved day by day. He eventually returned to work, thinner and more serious, but with a quiet strength he hadn't possessed before. One evening, months after it all ended, we were sitting on the back patio, the same patio where I had overheard Sophia plotting her final move. The sun was setting, painting the Dallas sky in hues of orange and purple. We sat in a comfortable silence for a long time. Finally, Michael turned to me. "She never once said she was sorry," he said, his voice quiet. "Not for trying to kill me. Only sorry that she got caught." "I know," I said softly. He looked at me, his eyes clear and full of a love that was now forged in fire. "We survived, Mom. Because of you. You saved my life." "We saved each other," I replied, taking his hand. We had lost a part of our family, a part that turned out to be a cancerous lie. But in doing so, we had found a deeper, more profound truth in our own bond. We had been through the worst a family can endure, and we were still standing. We were survivors. And as I looked at the sunset, I knew that while the scars would always remain, they were a testament not to our pain, but to our strength. We were ready to build a new beginning from the ashes of the old. It's been 2 years now. The house is quieter without Sophia's false laughter, but it's a peaceful quiet. It's a real quiet. Maria still brings in fresh roses from the garden, and their scent no longer feels like part of a stage play. It just smells like home. Michael is fully recovered, physically at least. He's back to being the brilliant mind at his firm, but he carries a new gravity with him. He's more discerning, more protective of his heart, and I don't blame him. We both are. The divorce was finalized while Sophia was already in prison, a simple legal formality to sever a tie that had already been destroyed by betrayal. The Vance Foundation has become my life's new passion. We've helped dozens of women escape abusive situations, providing them with the legal funds, the business grants, and the emotional support they need to stand on their own 2 feet. I meet these women, I hear their stories of being used, belittled, and betrayed by the people who were supposed to love them. And in their eyes, I see a reflection of my own journey. I see the same steel that I had to find within myself. Turning the ugliest chapter of my life into a source of hope for others has been the most profound healing I could have ever imagined. Sometimes late at night I find myself thinking about Sophia. Not with anger anymore, but with a kind of baffled sadness. Her greed was a sickness, a bottomless pit that consumed her humanity. She had a husband who adored her, a life of comfort, a mother-in-law who loved her like a daughter. She had everything, and yet it wasn't enough. She chose a path of destruction for a prize she would never get to enjoy, and now she sits in a concrete cell, her life reduced to 4 walls. all because she couldn't stand to see someone else hold the keys to a kingdom she felt entitled to. Her ambition wasn't to build something, it was simply to take something. And that is the ultimate tragedy of a person like her. My son and I, our relationship has been forged into something unbreakable. We talk about everything now with a raw honesty that we didn't have before. We learned, in the most brutal way possible, that family isn't just about blood or marriage certificates. It's about trust. It's about loyalty. It's about knowing, without a shadow of a doubt, that the person sitting across from you at the dinner table wants what's best for you, not what they can take from you. The story I've shared with you today is a reminder. A harsh one, I know, that evil can wear a beautiful mask. It can smile at you, cook you dinner, and call you mom. The deepest betrayals often come from within the sacred walls of our own homes, from the people we let our guard down for. It's a painful truth, but ignoring it is a luxury none of us can afford. My story is about the horrifying discovery of that betrayal, but more importantly, it's about the fierce, unyielding power of a mother's love. It's a love that will fight, that will scheme, that will face down death itself to protect its own. Thank you so much for listening to my story all the way through. It's not an easy one to tell, but I believe in the power of sharing our experiences. Now I want to ask you something. Have you ever had a gut feeling that something was deeply wrong in your own family? A feeling you tried to ignore? Have you ever faced a betrayal from someone you thought you knew? Someone who was supposed to be on your side? Please, share your thoughts in the comments below. You don't have to share details if you're not comfortable, but just knowing you're not alone can be a powerful thing. Every story shared is a light in the darkness for someone else who might be going through the same thing right now. If my story resonated with you, please give this video a like and subscribe to the channel for more stories like this. You never know whose life you might touch. Thank you.